Hello and welcome to the Grant Fundamentals training for the Nevada State Grant Office. This will be the first in a series of trainings, but this is going to give you a foundational understanding of what grant funds do, how they should be used responsibly, and where to look for resources if you have any questions. We know a lot of people working in programs have been handed a grant and it's here you go, you get to monitor this now, and so this is going to give you a solid foundation of help that is available and how to manage a grant properly. So a little bit about the Nevada State Grant Office. My name is Erin Hasty. I'm an executive grant analyst, and I will be putting together a training portfolio, so I'd love to hear from you additional trainings that you'd like to see or other topics that you have questions on or what you see as missing from your office. But about us is we are known officially as the Office of Grant Procurement Coordination and Management. We provide services to state agencies, local governments, and nonprofit organizations at no charge. Most of what we do is on the pre-award side, so starting up in grant applications, but we're also available to answer any questions about best practices at any point, either in the application, post-award, or closeout of the grant. We research and answer questions on best practices, so if at any point you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're connected with an array of grant professionals, and so we are happy to research on any questions that you have, whether it be on indirect costs, how to write a grant, or anything in between. So some services that we provide is we distribute federal funding opportunities. If you've ever looked at grants.gov or any of the listservs, they can be very overwhelming. And so we'll curate funding opportunities and send out at least once a month, sometimes more, on 13 specific topics. So if you go to our website, which will be shown at the end of the slideshow, you can sign up for funding opportunities by topic, such as workforce development, education, higher education, natural resources. Sign up, and then we will send you at least once a month current funding opportunities. If you have any questions or would like more information about those funding opportunities, we're also able to take a deeper dive and to let you know specifics and what the grant requires. We'll also provide project management for grant applications. A lot of the times people writing grants have full-time jobs, and so being put on a grant is in addition to your full-time work. The grant office will project manage and hold weekly meetings, hold deadlines, make deadlines so that the grant application is moving towards completion, and we'll be the ones who will follow up and then let people know if you are falling behind or if more information is needed. So we can really be the project driver to make sure that the grant application is moving forward according to plan. We also have a database, and we hear from statewide partners, and so we'll identify potential grant partners. If there's an education grant and we know of other local partners who are looking towards the same opportunities that you are, we'll connect you. Part of what makes a strong application is aligned services, and statewide grant applications make for stronger opportunities. So if we're aware of anybody who's working on the same goals as you, we will connect you with them. We also, if you're looking for a specific grant opportunity that's not out yet, you can let us know, and then we'll track it. And then if there are any opportunities in the future that we see, we'll reach out to you and let you know that those have become aware. We also provide technical assistance and training on federal and state grant mandates. A lot of times new policies come out or we hear about something, and so we will let you know best practices or if there's any new guidance that comes out. Okay, and then grant office resources. Part of this training is really to make this an intuitive feel for you. We can't teach you everything in a crash course about what grants are for, and we are constantly learning as well. But what I wanted to do in creating this training was to at least give you areas of where you can begin to look. Of course, you can always contact us, but these provide some really good resources for you when no one is available, or if you're in a pinch, or just to start to get to know the feel of grants. So the grant office website, we have a Nevada grant manual and grant process templates. This helps tell you what is required for your state agency to have, and then some best practices on how to get there. Of course, we're always available for questions if you have anything or need additional information. The grant manual is a good place to turn to learn about what is required in Nevada. We also have some grant process templates, including a decision matrix if you're thinking about whether a grant is a good fit for you or whether to put in the energy of whether to apply or not. We have some tools there that will help you decide that. We have pre-award process, we have post-award, and then we have best practices for managing the award. So you'll find those on our grant office website. There's a grant matching fund program that is getting ready to launch in January of 2020. It's a pilot project that has $1 million for grant match funds. We heard that a lot of people weren't able to apply for grants because they didn't have grant match. And so this is a pot of money that you'll fill out an application for, and it's reviewed by a team of reviewers. But if you cannot find grant match funds, then this program gives you resources, and you can apply to get the match from there. We also have a grant management system that is in the works. This will track and highlight grants throughout the state of Nevada. We have the Nevada Advisory Council on Federal Assistance. They are tasked with maximizing and optimizing grant funds into Nevada. There's legislators that serve on there, as well as nonprofits and business. The grant office provides staffing support to it, but they're really looking at a lot of policy and barriers and how to bring in more federal grant dollars to Nevada. And so if you're interested in attending any of those hearings or meetings, sign up and let us know. They through their recommendations, we received legislation for the grant matching fund and the grant management system. And they're always interested in hearing from nonprofits, local governments, and state agencies on barriers that they face as grant professionals, whether that's in applying or having issues administering them. We also have the Funding Opportunities Listserv, which I mentioned earlier. We curate and send out topic-specific grant opportunities. We serve as a single point of contact, or SPOC. You may have seen Intergovernmental Review or Executive Order 12372. Our office is the SPOC, so if you ever see that in the future, just know that you need to contact us. The purpose of that was to create aligned grant applications. So if you let our office know, we prefer that you let us know when you're applying for it before you submit the application. So if you're applying for a grant opportunity and we know other people are applying for a grant opportunity, we look to align the applications. So if you can work together, one single application is stronger than another. And so if you see the SPOC or single point of contact, then you need to contact our office and let us know that you're applying for the grant. We also host viewings of NGMA trainings and other trainings that we're subscribers for. A lot of the grant professional organizations put together subrecipient monitoring and very topic-specific trainings that deal with audits or just very specific matter. And since we subscribe, we can host viewings. So we will be sharing those as we get those, and that's a good way to learn more content-specific ways. We also have a state grant work group, which that's where we post a lot of the trainings that we see. And so if you are a grant professional and you'd like to have resource of state agencies, then let us know. And the state grant work group is set up in Microsoft Teams. We contact to a lot of grant professionals. We ask for their advice, or we let them know best practices or anything we hear. And so it's just a really nice way to be connected with other grant professionals across state agencies and to hear from the grant office. Or if you guys have questions from each other, then you can post it on there, and it's just a really nice learning lab. So if you're interested in becoming part of the state grant work group and you work in grants, just let us know and we will sign you up. Okay, so the training objectives for today, again, this is to make grants intuitive for you. If we shared everything that was required for grants, there's no way we could do this in an hour. And so this is to make it intuitive and to just alert you, to give you enough knowledge to be alerted if something doesn't seem right, or if you need to look into further information. So today you will learn a high-level overview of grants, learn how to think critically about what a grant award can and should do, and learn how to be a good steward of grant dollars. And so this is important because grant dollars, at its very essence, they provide services. And so if funds aren't being properly managed or properly written for, then it's not just that you get an audit finding and you get in trouble that way, but what it can really mean is services lost for other people. So you're being awarded something, and that means it's taking away from other people. And if funds aren't managed properly, then that can mean that somebody is not getting opioid treatment, or a child isn't getting preschool, all-day preschool, because grant dollars really are a way to provide really important services to people. And so when you're managing them, you're responsible for making sure that the dollars go to what they're supposed to. And again, when you're in the thick of it, it can seem just like pushing paper. But what grants do is they can provide really important services, and they can make a difference in someone's life. And when they're not being managed properly, that can be taking away from that. To get started, we'll do a quiz. So think about these. Anyone can get a grant. Grants can pay for anything and everything. And grants are money with no strings attached. Okay, true or false? Anyone can get a grant. That's false. Grants have eligibility requirements. They're highly competitive, and many proposals don't get funded. Our office is frequently contacted by people looking for personal loans or business loans. And the truth is that if you've ever seen a notice of funding opportunity, there are very specific requirements. And you really have to make sure that you're reading it and that you're eligible. Additionally, many grant proposals don't get funded. Our office is contacted by a lot of people who think that because they've created something that they're going to get funded automatically. And a lot of the federal funding opportunities we've seen are very competitive. I worked on a grant before that 8 were awarded, and there were over 200 submissions. We've had partners who have applied for grants 7 times and been awarded on the 7th time. So it's very competitive. There's eligibility requirements, and it's not an automatic that you'll get funded. Okay, true or false? Grants can pay for anything and everything. That's false. Most are very specific about covered expenses. So we also get people reaching out to our office looking for paid vacations and things like that. And as you've known, if you've ever run a grant, you have to be very careful that you are operating within your grant agreement, because it specifically calls out what it's allowed for and what it's not. Okay, and true or false? Grants are money with no strings attached. That's false. Your agency, if you're awarded, is managing a promise, and grants have strings. So again, you're signing a contract essentially. When you're awarded the money, you are given parameters. It's like when you take a loan for your mortgage, you have to operate and pay on time, and there are certain things you can't do. It's the same with the grant. When you write the application, you're telling them what they're going to do. When you're accepting the funds, you're telling them that you will operate in those parameters, and they will be checking to make sure that you are doing those. Okay, so what a grant can do. A grant is a form of financial assistance, and while there are many different types of grants, what we're going to be talking about today is federal financial assistance, which is defined as a transfer of value, most often money, from a federal agency to a non-federal agency. So very simple, it's a transfer of money. It's designed to be a tool to serve public purposes defined by the funder, and they mostly solve social issues. So this is going to be dealing with federal funding, but I'll also talk about state funding as well, because the state funds and is responsible for overseeing subrecipients. And so in order to ensure that you're being a good steward of grant dollars, you need to be sure that you're doing risk assessments and that you're properly managing funds. And then you also need to be sure that you are operating in your parameters. Okay, so what a grant can do, of the federal funding, there are two categories that are described as discretionary and mandatory. So most funding is mandatory, and it's determined outside of the appropriations process. So Congress is given authority to spend funds, so they will set the appropriations, and then in a mandatory program, it's really limited. Like the regulations are limited to what it can be served for. Discretionary grants are competitive, and so Congress will set funds there, and then it really gives some leeway to the funding agency, the federal agency, to determine how those funds will be used. So if you look at this graph, the distribution of grants, out of the 209 programs, the mandatory or formula programs were only 47. However, if you follow the green, they accounted for $492 billion, or 76% of what the dollars went for. So while there is a smaller amount of programs, the funding for those are quite higher. We'll go into mandatory a little later, but really what that is like SNAP or Medicaid. Okay, and then if you look at the blue, so there were more discretionary grants, the number 162, or 78% of what was allocated by Congress in FY 2017, but only 153 billion, or 24%, was given out were those. So while there are more competitive programs, the funding is lower. As you saw in the previous slide, the highest number of grant opportunities are discretionary. And discretionary grants are competitive, which means that they go through a competitive scoring process. The most common way that these are distributed is a call for application will be issued through a notice of funding opportunity. So an agency will put out application requirements and scoring requirements in an application, and those who are interested will fill out the application to apply and compete to receive the discretionary grant. Okay, so how the discretionary grants are awarded is an application review is done. The applications are scored on established criteria, and generally the highest scored applications are recommended for funding. And again, this is when Congress sets it up and gives the federal awarding agency leeway in how to appropriate the funds. Some examples of state of Nevada discretionary grants is the Nevada Ready Pre-K grant. So it was given $43 million over 4 years to increase Nevada's preschool population. This was designed to give low-income children opportunities to enter into all-day preschool. So then that's what was originally happening, and then you see how because of the federal grant, then it was able to become part of state policy. So in the 80th legislative session, SB 84 outlined program requirements for now state-funded preschool programs. So you see again when I said earlier how the proper managing of funding can affect people. You see that by using this grant, this gives 4-year-olds under 200% federal poverty level the opportunity to attend all-day preschool. And then why is that important? Because data has shown that improved health, lifetime earnings, reduction in the need for special education and remediation, and lower dropout rates have happened, among many other things. So this federal grant has given many opportunities to people in the state. Another discretionary grant example is the Gear Up program, which connects low-income, underrepresented students to post-secondary opportunities in Nevada institutions. So they received $24 million for 7 years, and then the grant itself required some match funds. So it was a $24 million match, so $48 million total were given to provide post-secondary opportunities to low-income students. And so some outcomes for that were Gear Up students consistently exceeded the high school graduation rate. And again, you see how these grant dollars really go to important opportunities for Nevadans. Okay, so mandatory grants are also known as formula. Congress they just fund, and then the the federal agency itself is not given that much authority on how the funds are to be allocated. However, they do have sanction authority, and they can reduce the amount, or no award can still happen. So if you're not properly managing your prior formula funds, the agency can decide not to fund you. There's 2 types of non-discretionary and mandatory assistance called block grants and entitlement programs. Okay, so block grants are formula-driven grants where the awardee is responsible to further distribute money. A lot of agencies at the state have this, so they get the money and then they are inclined and mandated to pass through to local governments. So some examples include HUD's Development Community Block Grant, Department of Health and Human Services Child Care and Development Block Grant, and the Department of Labor's Workforce and Investment Act. Okay, so the block grant is WIOA, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It becomes law in 2014. The state is given some money, and then they are charged with distributing it to local governments. So the state, Nevada DETR, Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, gets awarded money from the Department of Labor, and then they're responsible for passing that through to local governments in order to take care and meet the bulleted mandates required by WIOA. So an example of a block grant seen in a local community, and remember a lot of the formulas funding requires a prime awardee, generally the state, to push out dollars to local communities and people who are able to implement services in the community from the local perspective. So for WIOA in Southern Nevada, The local board is called Workforce Connections, and they are tasked with seeking job seekers to education, job training, and employment opportunities. They are taking what is required in the WIOA Act and implementing it in the communities. So you'll see in Southern Nevada, those who are eligible are 412,000 adults and 90,000 youth. There are 35 neighborhoods that have double-digit unemployment. And then you have $120 million in annual funding across their one-stop partners, which is where all of these organizations and funding streams reside in an effort to streamline services for those who are eligible, to make it easier for participants to receive funding. Some examples include housing, temporary assistance for needy families, the Job Corps, unemployment, etc. So a participant can come to this one-stop location and receive services and check eligibility from multiple funding streams. So you see this is where a braided funding platform comes from. And then you see the large number of people who are eligible for receiving services. So proper management of these funds is essential, and they are doing incredibly important work in helping those who need it to receive job support, employment support, and to get on their feet. So the proper management and to continue to serve the WIOA charter so that the state can continue to receive funds from the federal agency is imperative. Okay, there's also, as part of the mandatory and formula grants, is what's known as entitlement grants. So the federal government is legally obligated to make grants to states for a person who meet the criteria for eligibility. So some examples include the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, federal unemployment, and then the Medicaid program. So if a person meets an eligibility requirement, then by law they are required to get the services, and then the state oversees those funds. An example includes Medicaid. So in Nevada, Medicaid provides health care for those at or below 133% of poverty. And then there's another portion of that, the Nevada Checkup, or CHIP, which provides health care benefits for uninsured children, for low-income families who are not eligible for Medicaid, but who are at 200% below the federal poverty level. And if you'll notice, the 200% federal poverty level, that was also what was in the preschool grant for children who were able to be eligible for all-day preschool. So you see this blending and braiding of data so that we're providing services for the same population, with healthcare and also with education. So to see what a large impact formula funding has in Nevada, in 2019 of August, 666,000 people were enrolled in Medicaid and CHIP. So that's 20% of the total Nevada population receiving services from Medicaid. In state fiscal year 2014, nearly $2 billion was used and spent in Medicaid. So you see that formula funding has a very large dollar amount that is used in Nevada, and also can provide services to a lot of its population.